I believe in that case there will be a trial. I believe the trial will take many months, and I don't expect that we will conclude until the winter or the very early part of 2025.
New statements from D.A. Willis today. We're joined now by David Kelly, the former U.S. attorney for the famed Southern District of New York. Full disclosure, my former boss, although, as I remind people sometimes, your views are in demand regardless of our career history. I set you up big because that's the thing. The videos are wild. We walked through them. But the next question becomes, for anyone keeping track at home, if the DA is telling the truth, we have no reason to doubt that. If they didn't plan this came out. How do you then respond as a prosecutor as your case is now spilling out in public?
I think in large measure, you keep your blinders on and keep your, eye on the prize here. I mean, this is going to come out. I don't think there's any real secrets here about a lot of the evidence if you're on, on the defense side. So it's no big secret. I don't think this is really hurts the government's case. We talked a few weeks ago about when Powell first pleaded guilty. About what her statement was going to be like. Now we know. What they did was they locked these statements in before they took their plea.
But let me quibble with you. You said you don't think it hurts the Georgia government's case. The DA said today she'd rather this wasn't out.
Oh, yeah. I'd rather, if I was in her shoes, I'd rather not be out too. But so what? And deal with it.
Yeah.
And I think the way you deal with it is how you got to this point. How you got to this point was you locked their testimony in to make sure that they don't go somewhere else and come up with something new when it's time for them to step into the witness chair.
When you see the nature of the conversation in there, from your experience, how does it strike you? Because viewers might say, gosh, it's not Perry Mason. They're not pounding the table. They've gotten these people's cooperation. Some of them are still dodgy. I mean, Sidney Powell is not what we would call a perfect witness.
No.
But walk us through what we're seeing in that room, because we don't usually get in there.
Well, she's not a perfect witness in the sense that she doesn't kind of deliver the big prize here, deliver a treasure chest. In some ways, she is good for the defense, right? What's good in a couple of different things is the demeanor of the prosecutors, being very carefully not to tread into attorney-client privilege information. So it's very clear that they're not beating statements out of these witnesses. They're simply having a conversation and letting the witness tell the story. I think it's also interesting here, too, insofar as the former president is going to claim that he really believed that the election was stolen. When you look at the people who he is getting his information from, someone like Sidney Powell, who talked about instincts and no facts and evidence, as you mentioned, as opposed to the Attorney General of the United States, he's cherry-picking information that he really wants to believe, but in the face of all facts and everything, it's unreasonable to have that belief. And I think that's what's going to sink him.
As you know, David, one of the things they're going to have to explain to the jury is that this was real and serious, not just some political hijinks. Now, this isn't the first time politicians and their aides have been on trial. It comes up a lot. Blagojevich, for example, tried to walk away from, it was just talk. No, they saw it as a bribe to sell a Senate seat, and he went and did a real bid. On the whole plot with Pence, they wanted to submit this sort of really bizarre fake elector material. I mean, it does feel like a reach. And yet the evidence in the indictment and the senators who we learned later were involved in Washington shows they actually went quite far. They took measurable steps. I want to show something that we made earlier in the year that connects. Because according to the new reporting here from the last day, the Cheeseboro Trump lawyer was actually going, and they were showing up in Washington with the fake stuff. And Ron Johnson was one of the people they wanted to get. They had Wisconsin and Georgia involved. And Senator Johnson, who, of course, could just come in and clear this up or deny it or address it, actually has been literally on the run. So I want to remind people of that and then talk about that arrow, that elector plot. Let's take a look at Senator Johnson.
How much did you know about what your chief of staff was doing with the alternate slates of electors? No, you're not. I can see your phone. I can see your screen.
Can you explain what your chief of staff was doing?
Does your chief of staff still work for you, Senator?
Can you explain what happened there? Why was your chief of staff even offering this to the vice president?
That's a complete non-story. We've issued a statement, and it's a non-story. I don't know what you're even concerned about here.
He was not on the phone. When you look at the arrows here, you have all of these different efforts and the Lecter's one has now been convicted. It's the very first arrow, the red convicted arrow, and it involved this kind of elector fraud, David. My question to you is, you got Ron Johnson over here, you got Cheesebro over there, you got these fake material. How do you clarify that if they do go to a jury trial, that this was a real political plot and not just quote unquote politics?
Yeah, or they could claim that this is so cockamamie that you can't believe that it's true. But I think you overcome that by some really, some efforts that are really material efforts that they made. They had memos laying out legally how they would go about this. They had electors who had been appointed to sign on to this. They had orchestrated this whole deal to get these things to Johnson. And then you have Johnson walking down the street holding his cell phone to it. It reminds me of my young child with, making believe they're having a conversation, and him trying to avoid it. So I think when you put this all together, it's not a cockamamie plot, and it doesn't come out as just politics. It's like a real kind of scheme. It may have been a crazy scheme, but it was a scheme nonetheless, one that was criminal.
The other new video is of a more minor figure, a bail bondsman named Scott Hall. Trivia. Hard to stump you, but trivia. Do you know how he first came into contact with Sidney Powell?
When she was looking to get freed on bail.
And regarding what kind of hunt? This is like
crocodile hunt.
Crocodile hunt. You got it.
As opposed to an alligator.
Yeah.